today we have two friends of ours. We've got Ev Terrell and Jamie Dykman from Code of Silence. We're going to be talking, first of all, welcome both of you to Deer Talk Now. Thanks for joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys might not know this company, but you definitely know the personalities. We actually had Jamie on Deer Talk here not that long ago. It was when we were at the show. And if you don't know Ev, you probably should. He's been in the industry, I think, longer than I have, and I don't want to age you there, Ev. But I know you've been around the block a few times.
Yeah, I started Cabela's in 1987, Dan, so I've been around.
You got me by a couple of years. You got me by a couple, not too many, but a couple.
I started when I was 14, though. So
yeah, I was going to say you look a lot younger than I do. You started when I wrote a letter to the owners of Deer and Deer Hunting offering to be a free intern, and they sent me a letter back. It was actually their assistant editor sent me a letter back saying, we don't know what we'd have you do, so thanks, but no thanks. That's a true story. So we're going to talk about your company a little bit, but you guys are experts in camouflage and clothing, and the things that really intrigue me over the years. If you guys don't know, I've worked at Cabela's for quite a few years, and a story that I always tell for people who don't know of Code of Silence, and this is no BS. Back in the day, now you're going to know some of these names. That was when Joe Arterburn was running the PR, and David Draper was there, and Mark Nelson was there. And those guys would send me some clothes, and it was always Cabela's branded clothes. And I don't know what it was, but every time I had Cabela's branded clothes, this is 25 years ago, I'm like, this stuff is so... I can tell a hunter built this, because it was quiet and it was warm, and I'm not bashing any other companies that make clothing, but to me there was always little details in there. And then I come to learn later that you were actually part of those teams that helped build that stuff.
yeah, it sure was. I was there for really. I did different things, Dan, at Cabela's, but for the most part, I spent my 30 years at Cabela's in hunting wear. So a lot of the clothing you're talking about, my team definitely had a lot to do with, and I appreciate your comments because we took it to heart. I mean, it was part of our culture and part of our DNA to build quality stuff that worked, and we spent a lot of time at it, and it was a great run. Had a lot of fun,
and it's still a great company today. But like back in those days, I know it was everything that you got. It was like it was like the arrows were good, like the clothing was good. Anything that had the Cabela's name on it, you knew they weren't just going to slap their name on something that wasn't quality. And so that was kind of the MO. Well, fast forward to today, I was looking at some of your stuff at, we've got some here in the office, but I know that you're dealing a lot with, I don't want to get this into being like, we're not product hawking Code of Silence. I'm just educating people about some of the things that go into what makes a good hunting garment. And one of the things that I noticed is you guys do a lot with like Berber and fleece wool. And I know from my past that wool was always great, but I know that you guys you're like molding technology with some of those things that we've had forever and making them better. Let's start there first, because I always said there's got to be a couple things for me, if it's going to be a good piece of, I call it gear, hunting clothing, even if it's a backpack or anything else. Is the camo good? Is it warm? Does it keep me warm? Don't sweat like I'm wearing a Ziploc bag? And is it quiet? The first thing I notice about the stuff that you guys are making, it's quiet. So how do you do that? What are you incorporating into clothing? Or I should say, what is any manufacturer working into clothing to make sure that it's quiet, number one, that you can go bow hunting with it or gun hunting with it, and it's not going to give you away?
Right. Well, back up just a little bit, Dan. So, I mean, one of the big goals we had when we created Code of Silence was around being quiet, was around being warm, was around having better camouflage. But kind of the good thing, the good news inside of all that is there are some super fabrics, if you will, that sort of deliver on all of those fronts. And we think high texture, for example, is critical into creating a technical and better concealment. But at the same time, those high pile fabrics are extremely good for being quiet. They're forgiving, you know, against about all surfaces, no matter what you're doing, and they're also very high performance in cold weather. You can have something that performs really, really well on a day like today, and you feel it in the store and you go, wow, this is awesome. Well, it's a different level of performance when it's 0 degrees or 10 degrees out, as we all know. So it's as important what we do, what I just described, but it's also important what we don't do. You won't see any Velcro on our garments. You won't see a lot of snaps, those type of things. Anything that's going to contribute to noise and kind of giving you up in the woods, if you will.
Yeah, Velcro's I mean, it's nice in some cases, but it's busted me on more occasion than once. And the other thing I noticed too with this modern stuff, I used to have one of my favorite outfits. Now this is going back many years ago. It was a wool outfit from, I believe, I can remember, the King of the Mountain, and they had pants and a kind of like a jacket shirt kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that stuff was so.
Around,
what's that?
Yeah. They're still around.
Are they still around? It was great stuff. It was wool, but it was warm, but it was very heavy. And the thing I noticed today is you guys are making stuff that, because when people think of any type of wool, they're like, oh, that's going to be super heavy. It's not. So how are you getting by with making stuff that's like for today's bow hunters? That is, this is actually, I'm wearing it and I'm not thinking that, well, I'm dressed super warm out here.
Yeah. Well, our fabrics are two key fabrics we have. We have what we call a more of a Berber type. We call Berber wool, and then we have fleece wool, which is a little bit flatter. We use those in a variety of complementary scenarios, you know, and how they fit in the garment. Even though they're very heavy, they would feel very heavy to you because of the loft and the pile I just talked about. You know, they're in that slightly technical term, but 300, 330, what people call GSM, grams per square meter, which would make them kind of a heavy mid-weight type fabric. You know, the fabrics you were describing in King of the Mountain were probably in the 500 GSM range. And so it's kind of just becomes as simple as, you know, using heavy fabrics or not using heavy fabrics. But that loft and the fact that we use a jacquard technique, so our fabrics are knitted. The camouflage pattern that you see on our shells is not printed like you will see in 90% of the clothing. It is actually knitted in. So there's 4 colors in our patterns. You have kind of 2 light browns and 2 darker browns. And so each one of those colors has its own thread color that is knitted in to form that particular, you know, component in the pattern. King of the Mountain would have done the same thing, actually. But that is a technique that also reduces weight because it reduces ink, and it also helps contribute on the loft I was talking about.
How did you devise these? I mean, I know what goes into, well, I know what kind of goes into this stuff. How did you come up with the camo patterns? And then what blows my mind is when I think, the other thing of when I think, I know I'm getting my head of myself here. When I think of wool, I'm like, that stuff is nice, but it's way too expensive. And I'm looking at your stuff, it's not that expensive. And the patterns are very nice. So is that being made here? Are you outsourcing it somewhere? And then I've got other questions because I think I know where this is going to be going.
So when you say are we outsourcing, you mean are we making the garments?
Are you making the garments here or you make them somewhere else?
Yeah, we make them overseas.
Right. Which is the next question is, I know how that works in the clothing industry. Good companies have people over there for quality control, and companies that might not be as good have stuff coming back. I had a guy, this is 25 years ago, we were talking about UV. And he said, that looks like a great shirt, doesn't it? And I'm like, yeah. And it was a real tree or mossy oak. And he's like, well, Do you think that's, well, it says UV free, and then he put a light on it. Well, the pocket wasn't, the one sleeve was, the other sleeve wasn't. So can you just get into a little bit how that works, making stuff overseas, and how do you control the quality on it?
Okay. Well, and I try not to get too far off of your question, but we are committed to building some level of our products domestically as we can. In fact, we've had a lot of conversations on that. So it's not like we hit the easy button and ran overseas, right? Today, finding the technologies we have in fabrics and the detail in the clothing we have, it was really the place we could, had to be focused, I guess. But as far as quality control, I think Jamie and I are really lucky that we've, been down this path so many times for so many years that understanding how a design process domestically works, that we do internally with people that we know that know how to build garments, and then speccing that out correctly, that design tech, what we call a tech packet, becomes your contract with a manufacturer. So it is really your blueprint of the house that you get back out and say we wanted this size of zipper, we wanted this many stitches per inch, we want this type of lining with this type of content, this level of DWR. I mean, you can't imagine the level of detail that goes into that. But that's kind of job one, in ensuring that what you are trying to buy is what is being built. I just got back from Vietnam about 6 weeks ago, a month ago, I guess, and spent a lot of time in the factories overseeing that. You choose factories that have the right oversight and quality, both in the manufacturing process and then post-manufacturing process. There is policies and procedures in place where they inspect for sizing, broken stitches, fit, every single thing. And it's a lot about just keeping your eye on the ball at all times and starting with the right integrity of the process and never letting your guard down, Dan.
Yep.
I'd say just to add to within there, the manufacturers that we work with, we're firm believers of playing to people's strengths. Like, you're going to come across manufacturers that are just like yes men, and then you're wasting so much time, and that quality is really hard to hold that accountability when you're trying to build a product that's actually outside of their scope and their skill set. So a lot of the relationships that we really have, fine-tuned and figured out what their skill set are and align that with the needs of our products. So that helps hold the integrity and accountability with our relationships very strong.
Well said, Jamie.
That's one of the things that really fascinates me, excuse me, about the clothing industry in general. Excuse me. Because I know fleece is not easy to make, is it? A fleece garment?
It is not.
And there's different types of fleece, isn't there? Like a jacket, for example. Somebody says, well, this is a fleece jacket. It's nice and quiet. But then you wear it, and it's like, well, this one isn't nice as that one. And I know there's got to be some kind of manufacturing process that's different.
Absolutely, Dan. There's, I guess I would describe it, hundreds, if not thousands, of different finishing techniques in fleeces that give it a different level of performance. In some cases, it's softer and has more loft to it. Some cases, it's more durable. What's on the backside is also something you usually don't see. That's an important factor. For example, the Berbers we have with wool as a composite, I could count the number of people that I would trust to be able to produce a product like that on about half a hand. It's very, very rare. And so it's not like you can just go to a fleece manufacturer and say, hey, give me some Berber wool. Not even close. In fact, even the people that say they can do Berber wool, there's only a couple that really do it well.
Mm-hmm.
Deer Talk Now is brought to you by Moultrie. Moultrie Mobile's Edge Trail Camera is affordable and easy to set up. The camera works on multiple networks nationwide and even has built-in storage. That means no SD card required. For more information, visit moultriemobile.com. So how do you guys set yourself apart from what seems to be a growing trend of new hunting clothing companies?
Well, to be honest with you, we don't really think, I guess, about, the others that are out there. I mean, it's really about being focused on providing solutions for hunters that, enable them. That's one of our key words. We really thought clothing needed to be an enabler. I've never put hunting clothing on, even though I've built it for 30 years and likely built as much or more than anyone else ever has. I still didn't put my gear on and go, wow, I really think this clothing's taking me to another level. There was clothing that was keeping me warmer. There was clothing that kept me drier. There was clothing that was allowing to move different. But as a total system and a total, particularly for whitetail bow hunting, it wasn't a clothing piece that I put on or a system that I put on that said, this is taking me to a new level. And so that was really the only focus. And I think we believe that as we deliver on that sets us apart in and of itself. That if we can do that better than anyone else, which we think we are, that's our goal. And it's not about we're going to be, worried about this guy or worried about that guy. We're doing our own thing, and we think we found solutions for quietness, for warmth, for camouflage, for freedom of movement, and because of our background and sort of our true direct to manufacturing model, we can do that very cost effectively as well.
Well, that I would disagree with you on when you said it takes you to a new level. And I wish I could remember. Maybe you're going to remember this, but I don't remember the name of the series of the clothing that Arterburn gave me back in the day. But it was a jacket. I still have it. I wear it plowing my driveway now because it's so beat up and old. But it was a really warm jacket with a matching bibs. And when I put those on, I'm like, when I hunted with that stuff for, gosh, this is like I'd be 15 years old. I'm like, I've never had anything like this. But that was back in the day when, we were going to Fleet Farm and buying whatever they had on the shelves back in the 80s.
For sure.
And you'd put it on and it's like, oh, yeah, okay, this is cool. This is orange or this is camouflage or whatever it happens to be. And especially with the camo clothing, nobody, and that's why I mentioned the thing with the UV because I know there's a science to that. Nobody was thinking about it. And honestly, I don't think any hunters were thinking about that. But the some of the other things were form and function. You had something that was warm, yes, awesome, but now I'm climbing 30 feet up in a tree, and it's like I can't even move, much less draw my bow. Exactly. So I know there's things that you guys do that kind of people take for granted as far as how you're designing the stuff and, like I said, making the stuff lighter. And also the camouflage I wanted to get into is I don't even know how you go about doing that with wool. How are you making patterns with a wool garment? I just probably gave you like 10 questions, so I'm just going to sit back and drink my water now.
Well, I'll kind of pick it apart a little bit. So your question on camo, that was a really tall order. We knew that, saying, hey, we're going to take it to another level, that's pretty hard to do. I mean, I was going back to my start date at Cabela's. I mean, Toxie Hayes was about 2 or 3 years into it. Jim Crumlin was probably 5 years into it. Bill Jordan was 2 or 3 years into it. And then, seeing those guys with 30, 40 patterns since then, and all the way to 16, 18 different colors and photographic realism and everything that went into making better camo. And to say you come out, 45 years after Crumley started and say, we're gonna take camo to the next level. It's like, well, yeah, good luck. We just really thought that the light absorbent side of camouflage was not being addressed. And that's a lot of why we use jacquard. It's a lot why we use organic based materials. It's a lot why we use high texture and everything to create light absorbances that are more similar to what you would see in the woods. And I won't get into the detail there, but it's really why waterfowlers are going to flocked heads on their goose decoys. It's why ghillie suits work. It's why I can't see a deer sometimes if I take my eyes off a doe on my stand. is those materials absorb light. And so that was really the premise of how we thought we could improve camouflage. Pattern was a secondary view, and we said, hey, how can we do something totally different? And we really let science take over, Dan. We thought when we did a camo, sorry if I'm rambling on here, this will be a long answer, but
Not at all.
In the camouflage side, for the most part, and nothing against anyone that's done anything, but they're really art. They're pieces of art. That author says, I think there should be a leaf here and a branch there, and good for them. But we really wanted this to be nature's camouflage, and that sounds, I know, so cliche, but we went and looked at the average tree stand height in the Midwest, took sample surveys, and came up with an average tree stand height of 14.8 feet. And when you put a 6-foot human in that at a belt line, 17.8 feet, hence we round up to 18. So our camouflage is called S18 for stand 18. So we went to that 18-foot mark on the 5 most common species of trees in the Midwest and looked at the branch size and the branch density at that 18-foot mark, and that drove the element composition and the pattern. As far as colors, we took those same 5 trees and identified the 5 most common colors. We could only use 4 in using the jacquard, so we had to use kind of 2 darks and 2 lights, but finding the common denominator colors and mimicking those exactly, we really think that we have come as close to a truly universal and scientifically based pattern as we can. Then you throw that on top with the light reflectance. It's we outkicked our coverage on it. I will look anyone in the eye and say how deer react or don't react to the surface of our materials is materially, pardon the pun, different than anything else I've ever had on.
Were you listening to this, Ian? His story right there about the technology and the camo.
Yeah.
So if you look, this is one of their backpacks. You look at it, and that was the one thing that was amazing me, was like, I don't know how you got all the different colors in there. This episode is also brought to you by GameHide. At GameHide, the philosophy is pretty simple. Design the best products with the best fabrics and features to help you be more successful in the field. While doing this, they strive to keep their pricing moderate to give you the best value in the hunting clothing industry. I wear the Elimitic line of clothing to keep those nasty ticks off of me, and I absolutely love it. Check them out at gamehide.com. Ev, do you know the story behind, you were talking about, what blows me away, first of all, question, how long did it take you guys to come up with that, where you're looking at tree stand heights, you're looking at tree species and colors and stuff like that? How long was that process, approximately?
18 months.
18 months, so a year and a half.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear the story about, this is a deer and deer hunting story, so I have to share it. I've shared it before, but did you ever hear the story about when Jim Crumley started Tree Bark?
A little bit. I know Jim pretty well, actually, and so I've shared a few campfires with him even. So
he's a great guy. One of the best guys
awesome.
One of the best guys, most humble Christian man that you've ever met.
I'm a huge fan of Jim Crumley.
He was a school teacher in West Virginia, and he calls up Jack Brower, who was the founder of Deer and Deer Hunting. This would have been in about right after these guys started the magazine, about 77. And Jim says, I'm a teacher. He said, I'm a hunter. I love hunting more. I want to do something. And they had conversations going back and forth. And Jack and Al at the time were making their own camouflage by spray painting leaves onto trees. I mean, onto Carhartt overalls that they bought at Sherpers down in Oconomowoc. And Jack goes to the cemetery in Appleton, Wisconsin in February and takes pictures of, guess what? Close-ups of tree bark.
Right.
And he sent them to Jim, black and white photos, and he said, if you could somehow mimic this on clothing, I think people would buy it. And that's kind of how that's, I mean, I'm not giving those guys 100%, but there was a DDH connection there. Right. And it was, but that was, you are of your time. That was.
Yeah.
But now I look at this stuff and it's like, I can't imagine, like, Because I know you guys are. Where is Coda Silence based?
Sydney, Nebraska,
Nebraska, and you have an
yep,
Iowa connection, and you have
yeah,
a.
yep. Darren Youngblood, who's my partner,
Yep.
Lives in Northeast Iowa.
So if you look at like Iowa and Nebraska and Illinois and Missouri and Wisconsin and Minnesota and Michigan, I know we feel like homers because we're always talking about the upper Midwest. But then you can even extrapolate that to Ohio and Indiana and Pennsylvania, New York, and most of the whitetail hunting states. But I honestly believe you take some of that clothing and you're up in a tree, and even in the South, it's the premise is still there because you're talking about shades and shadows and things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really, I guess, impressed with the reaction of animals, and I know that it just sounds so, yeah, okay, I'm serious. I do a lot of varmint calling, and our coyotes get called a lot, and you get a coyote to come over a hill 200 yards away and stare at you and try to figure out if you're the real deal or not. And I cannot believe the difference in varmints. And I'm talking about, on a grass-covered hillside, it's noticeably different I'm not saying they just like look at you like they're invisible, but being of that light absorbance I'm talking about, I think it's the safe side of what they feel they're worried about in the woods and in their environments. I'm impressed with the way coyotes react to it, or don't react to it, I should say, for example.
Now, how do you what is your preferred scent elimination routine with, like, the Berber and the fleece? I know it's got to be a little bit different. You can't just throw that stuff in a washing machine, right?
You sure can.
You can. Oh,
you can.
Well, I'm wrong. Absolutely. There. Okay.
These are wool composites, so that helps quite a bit. We do recommend gentle cycle wash and line drying them. Yeah. And I'll be honest, which we are to a fault sometimes, but our high pile, fabrics, just because of that extra texture, it's going to pill over time.
Yep.
It's going to get roughed up, and so it's not going to fall apart if you dry it or something like that. It's just going to hold its original form and its original state longer. If you just take care of it, just be nice to it, I think is what we say. And
it's good clothing, but it's not bulletproof, right?
Exactly.
And the other thing too is I don't think I'd want to walk through a bunch of stick tights with that either.
No, that's for sure, and it's a trade-off. We can build clothing that doesn't pick up burrs. That's not a problem at all, and we can build waterproof clothing.
It's gonna be very loud and noisy.
Yeah, it's gonna be loud, and it's not something that's going to perform on the absorbent side we talked about. So we are doing a lot of things to help mitigate. We understand birds are part of the woods, and so our pants and our bibs, for example, have full-length leg zippers. So we're really trying to facilitate carrying our gear in, putting it on close to the stand, which is huge in staying warm, as everybody knows, I think, and so we kind of killing two birds with one stone there. But
well, I'm not going to go through all the products. I'll let people go to your website and check that out. One thing I do want to note, and I actually want to ask you is, and I mentioned it before, I'm honestly shocked at the price that you guys have on some of this stuff, which please don't raise the prices, because I think guys are going to, they're going to look at this as like, I can get a really nice set of bibs for like $150, which is just, in today's age, awesome deal. And a jacket, I think some of the jackets I was looking at were, they're like $200-300. But I mean, I know other places I'm like, I'm not dropping $1,000 on a jacket. I'm just not doing it. How are you keeping that price down for the consumer?
I'll let Jamie, you want to talk about that?
This is something that I think, really excites us, being able to provide a high quality product at a value price. A lot of it is really the relationships with our manufacturers and our expertise within developing products, to where we're able financially to price position those at a great value to our customer. I think, though, one thing that we've talked about, and I might be sharing too much, but being in all transparency, what's going to be difficult for us, and this is where we're spending a lot of energy and time in educating the consumer, is that when they're holding, a jacket over here that's $600-700 and holding our jacket that's $240, the quality is the same. But how do you convince the consumer to understand that this price point, you're not sacrificing quality? So that's something that, we're very passionate about providing that value to our customer and still having the high level performance within our gear. But it's gonna take some time for people to believe it. And what's awesome is, some of the partners and people that already have our product in their hands are starting to really share that secret of, man, this stuff's awesome stuff, and at a price where you don't have to question it. So,
which leads to my next question. What is the supply chain as far as how do consumers buy it at stores, or can only buy it online? What is your outlet?
So we do sell wholesale. We have some great retail partners, not across the U.S. per se yet. We do have some great partners that have jumped on board right away. We're just so new that we don't have we're not saturated, I guess, across the U.S., but definitely part of our model. And we don't mind sharing that if someone wants.
What are some, just throw some of those names out at me, Ev. What are some of the ones, like, guys are listening, is like, well, where can I find this stuff if I wanted to go to the store?
So North and East Shield stores. We're in Sportsman's Guide.
And some kind of mom and pop type relationships. I say Shields and Sportsman's Guide are the two.
Those are the two bigger ones that people would recognize. And can they also order direct?
Yes.
They can. So you can. I was on the website this morning, actually, just looking at all the. There's a lot of. They actually, like, these backpacks are super nice, and it was nice to have one in here to look at it. But that's the thing that what Jamie was talking about, and like I said, I'm not going to name names, but a lot of times it's with anything in life. You get, whether it's a cooler or whether it's a e-bike or anything, there's brand recognition. And then when you look at it, and I'm going to keep, I'm sorry to keep doing this, but I'm going to go back to the Cabela's model and I know some people got mad at me when I did a equipment guide store. You guys can actually look it up if you're this old. But it was 1997, and it was on arrows. And I know Gary Cornyn would probably box my ears if he was listening to this podcast, but I had Cabela's, and I had Easton, and I had Gold Tip, and I had all the arrows. And I said, these Cabela's arrows are pretty damn good. And then actually it was Pat Mateen. He said, well, those are rejects, right? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, those are the ones that didn't meet their specs, so they were so. But I said, they're really good. And he goes, yeah, that's why they're $29 a dozen. But like, my point is, if you can have a really high quality product, and I'm like, well, this other one's got to be better. It's like $600 more, like you're talking about, like the jacket. And I'm like, well, I wish everybody could to field test this stuff. But I think it's also too, what you guys probably got going on that's going to work for you is that word of mouth. Because once people, like I said, if it's made for hunters by hunters, I don't care what the product is, people are going to flock to it.
Well, I think you're dead on everything you just said. In fact, I was smiling when you were talking about Cabela's arrows, and I'm still on eBay looking for the old Stalker Extremes all the time. Yeah, I really am. And,
do you know Jim? Do you know Jim Schlender?
Oh yeah.
Jim's a really good friend of mine. We were just talking about this the other day, and he was telling me like how he
would definitely remember me, and he and I wrote a couple articles together. Pretty avid walleye fisherman. He and I did a couple regional articles on walleye fishing. Yeah.
We were talking. He worked there back in the day for a little bit, and he would say he'd go to that bargain bin, or bargain cave or whatever they had, and he said, "Yeah, I'd be picking all." I said, "Where did you get this, or where did you get that?" And he goes, "Yeah, I picked that up when I was working there." But some of the stories are just that's topic for another day.
It's a lot. It's a lot of fun, and like you said earlier, they're still doing it in a pretty good way. They really are, and I think that's a lot of where the view on value comes from. I mean, I spent 30 years there, and it was ingrained in me from the very top of Jim Cabela on down. Of we're a good firm handshake type people, and we're gonna shoot people straight, and we're going to try to offer the best value we can. And I can't really get that out of my system, to be honest with you.
Well, that's awesome, and it's very much needed in the hunting space, I think, because people kind of they were skeptical when we took this over, because this was corporate for 25 years, more than that. And they said, yeah, you're going back in time, because we only have like 10 employees here, you know. And but I said, if you make for, in our case it's media, but I'm like, you make good products, you give people value, you teach them something. It's always, and it's the same thing with what you have there. And like I said, it might not always be easy, but I think it's going to come out in the wash. That's a good pun, isn't it? In the wash. There we go. Where can the Deer and Deer Hunting listeners, Deer Talk Now listeners, where can they go to find out more about all the clothing and backpacks and everything else you guys have?
Jamie?
Yeah, you can visit us at codeofsilence.com. So we have the full line there and information there.
Codeofsilence.com. If you're near Shields, check them out. The other one you guys said was Sportsman Warehouse, right?
Yeah, and Archery Country up in kind of the Twin Cities too.
Archery Country. I've never been there.
So far, just on board, excited about their excitement, I guess.
That's cool.
There, but we do pick up right now as the volume allows us. I was just on this morning for the call, chatting with some people online. You're going to talk to one of us, and we don't mind talking. So feel free to ask questions on our website, and there's some chat sessions in there. We will respond.
Not only good people, but they're good deer hunters. So that's a good thing. If you're going to chat with them, that's a good person to chat with. Well, Ev and Jamie, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm glad we had you on. Very informational. Okay. Well, that's awesome. Thank you. That's it for this week's episode of Deer Talk Now. The only thing we ask you guys is to like and subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast or watching this podcast. We have them archived video versions on Facebook and YouTube, and wherever podcasts are dropped, you can drop them there and listen to them. Every Thursday, we have a new one coming at you. So, for Jamie Dykman and Ev Terrell, I am Daniel Schmidt. We'll catch you next week for another episode of Deer Talk Now. Deer Talk Now is brought to you by 10-Point Crossbow Technologies. Whether I'm in a tree stand, ground blind, or spot and stalk hunting, I know the Nitro 505 is up to any challenge. Check one out at a dealer near you or log on to 10pointcrossbows.com for more information.